Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And today we're going to be taking a look at Light 3.0 Raphael, who was given away for free as part of the Season 3 6-month airing celebration. We've received a free copy of a random Rimuru for the past 4 months, and this is number 5, Light Rimuru, Raphael, whatever you want to call him. He is objectively the best one that we have received thus far, second being the first anniversary of Rimuru, and we still have one more coming for the month of September, and then the anime is done airing and this celebration is done. So I don't know who else they're going to give, but Raphael is still a good, solid support character, even though he came out for New Year's of 2023. So he's over a year and a half old now at this point, and still reasonably usable and solid for teams that need his skill set. So he is a single target light magic for 80%. His first skill lowers alt damage or alt resistance by 50%, which is a pretty hefty debuff right there. And then gives all allies Pierce, which is good. We're currently in a Pierce meta with the Ogres Pride team, so if you don't have Momiji and you still need to Pierce, Rimuru can get that done for you. And that means you can take advantage of Benimaru's massive 100% Pierce power buff on turn 8 if you have Benimaru. His second skill is a guaranteed stun, and then New Year's Blessing or Otherworld Legend characters get 40% stun strike. Now this used to only be himself. He would only give himself a 40% stun strike, but this is a skill-fused skill, which gave it now New Year's Blessing and Otherworld Legend characters now get 40% for 2 turns. So New Year's Blessing is not a super big category, right? It's the magic, it's this team, it's like the Fire Milim and stuff like that, and then it's the actual New Year's Blessing EX team with Rimuru and Shinsha and Milim. Otherworld Legend is Vengeance, so man, Vengeance does not need a stun strike, right? You might be stunning with the Vengeance team, but you're not going to bring this Rimuru on that team. He's a bit too expensive for a protector that doesn't go over 100 SP. But it does mean that you can still get some solid damage out of Rimuru. Valor trait lowers orange gauge increases, whatever. His actual trait, if you're level 84 or level 92, gives you protection gauge every 3 turns, which is good. It's not as good as the turn 2 ones or the first couple of turns you get it, but it is reliable, and you can get it a couple of times in every fight. So overall, this Rimuru is a solid character. Let's put him in action. Alright, so the first team we're going to test him is his own team, well, kind of, mostly. So Protector Shuna, stacking Pierce power and stun strike. Raphael gives the Pierce rate. Raphael stuns, so we activate both of the Protector powers using just Raphael. We've got Shuna for orb changing and alt buff. We've got Visions of Coleus Violet for the massive magic buff, because this entire team is magic, and she's got the orb change. Light Lumi has the green convert, the light buff, and because of Eldora technically cannot be stunned, because he's got 100% stun resistance, this Light Lumi's skill lowers the stun resistance down to 0, and gives us the 60% light attack buff while also converting. And then this Light Milim lowers light resistance, gives a 45% attack buff, and converts her own blue orbs. So converter, 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 converter. Buff, 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 buffs. This was a very, very, very strong team when it came out, which is why it made my honorable mention for the top 5 metas, because this team really started off this huge power creep of stacking teams and doing oodles and boodles of damage. Now, it's been a hot minute since it released, which means that right now we have Momiji on an AoE doing 30 million. Raphael does not do 30 million. But it got us started on that trend. Okay, so starting out, this is a traditional blue stacking team, so everything that we do in this entire fight should not be a surprise to people unless you just started playing. In which case, then, I guess you should be used to a blue stacking team, because that's what's going on right now with the Ogres Pride team. But this free Rimuru, being a not EX character, being quite old at this point, can still put up fairly solid numbers with even mostly old support units around him, and that's mainly because of the power of double stacking buffs from Protector Shuna. So, stacking Stun Strike, Rimuru already gives himself 40%, plus we'll get the permanent 8 to 10 stacks depending on how lucky you are. And then we also have got the Pierce power, which, as we've seen from Protector Benimaru, 100% of that really does buff your damage quite heavily. We are going to get, obviously, the big-time magic buff from EX Violet, which is very nice, but also highly unnecessary for this team, unless you want to get 5 orbs of her like this. But at least we can convert it. And I don't really want 5 orbs of Violet, but, here we are. But it's important that we keep stacking on Raphael, because Raphael's the point of this showcase. So, in this setting, he is a reliable DPS character in the stage where you can stun, and even if you can't, you can bring Lumi, and where Pierce is not nerfed. So, Raphael, having the Pierce attached to him, you can still play around with it if you don't want to Pierce, right? Because the ult resistance down, if you're looking to bring Raphael as just a support unit, and the stage nerfs Pierce, you can always have your nuking character in the back, use Raphael's skill, you can give Pierce the front line, who are not nuking, and you can put the ult resistance down debuff on the enemy, and then you can bring in your actual nuking character, and because they were not up front when you used Raphael's skill, they do not have that 100% chance to Pierce, therefore they're not going to nerf their damage against a stage that has 100% Pierce resistance or something like that. So there are ways to play around it, and it's good that the ult resistance down is a debuff that you can put on pretty much whenever. And it's not limited. It's not a one-use kind of thing. You can use a skill over and over and over and over again. So if you're using a different stacking protector that resets skill costs, and you're going to be nuking left, right, and center, you can always pretty much have... Like, if you're using Overlord Rimuru, right? Overlord Shizu already puts ult resistance down on the enemy, but if you don't have Overlord Shizu, you can still use this Raphael to give a 50% debuff, which is quite hefty. Quite hefty indeed. And everyone will benefit from it. So you nuke with 3 characters, you have that debuff. Alright, you reset it, it's back down to 55 points, and you nuke like 2 turns later with other characters, and you're just constantly doing more damage, which is nice. And we can also put up good damage numbers, because as most characters in this game, if you drown them in support, they will do good things. Even the worst characters can put up reasonable numbers if literally 4 other characters around them are giving them massive support buffs. And this Raphael is already giving pretty good support, right? We're all ult resistance down, Pierce power, or Pierce resistance, or sorry, Pierce rate, and then the stun strike for himself and the guaranteed stun, if you can stun, and if you can't stun, I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. So here, we're on turn 7, we're going to use the magic buff from Violet now, and then get one more stack on Raphael, and then send him away. So we don't... so we can use the rest of the skills next turn without falling flat, because we have an extra 80. If we were to max out our points here, I mean, we would be able to use the 80-point skill, most likely, because we have a bunch of 55 skills here. It's not like a modern EX team where it's 80, 80, 80, 90, 80 points among all the characters. But now, we have to stun Veldora first. So let's use the ult buff from Shuna, and then we can send her away. The ult buff does affect the ult for Raphael even in the back. There we go. And then we can use the Lumi buff, and then lower the stun resistance for Veldora. Boom. And now, we can bring Light Milim in for Violet, because we already have the magic buff applied. We can use her attack buff, we can stun, and get the stun strike, and the pierce, and the ult resistance down, plus 2 more stacks of Protector Shuna. And now we're going to look pretty good, even with a mostly old team. And we'll even turn on the animation so we can see the Raphael ult. And we'll send these follow-up orbs, even though they're really very unnecessary. So this is an example of what a over 1.5-year-old unit can do on their team. 2.6 million damage. 2.6. Now, yes, that pales in comparison to what EX teams put up now with 10, 15. Momiji's doing 30 million on an AoE. But if we compare that to... Let me try and find the video here, hold on. If we compare that to what the team 2 metas prior to it, the first anniversary team when it came out, Veldora, Autogram Lumi getting 60% ult damage, Rimuru giving the crit damage and guaranteed crits, Milim with the ult buff and her attack buff, and Dark Shinsha. If we max this team out plus the magic buff from Veldora, I mean, on the nuke, we do how much damage? Yeah, how much damage do we actually do with this team? This team came out 2 months prior to that light team, and it did 455,000 damage. And even if we don't have Violet on that light team that we just showed, we were still going to do over 1 million. So, I mean, that's how much power creep that the light 3.0 team introduced. Going from less than 500,000 at full buff to doing 2.5, 1.5, 1.8 million damage. Raphael's team is still very, very good to this day. So let's try him out on the current Ogres Pride team, because he can work there. Raphael can also work as a decent replacement on the Ogres Pride team if you don't have Momiji, right? You weren't lucky, well, you were kind of lucky. You got Benimaru off of your free farmable tickets from the shop. Okay, you have your Koban tickets, or you threw a few multis at Soe because he's really good, and you managed to get him. You've got some other existing characters, but you don't have a character that can really give you that pierce. Well, Raphael can do that. Doesn't have to be skill fused, because a skill fusion means absolutely nothing to this team, because none of them, apart from Raphael, are on New Year's Blessing or Otherworld Legends, so they're not going to get that 40% stun strike, and you're not even stunning here anyways, because that skill is mostly sealed. So we're going to nuke with Soe, and to activate the 100% pierce power from Benimaru, Raphael will give Soe that guaranteed pierce, while also contributing that 50% ult resistance down. Granted, it's only to one enemy, but it's still gonna be more than enough damage. Okay, so I know this team, it's like the new team, but it does have a lot of EX characters on it. They're not what I would consider super necessary. Like, it's not necessary to have Idol Shuna here, but she is going to be giving synergy rate, which we kind of need to activate Soe's synergy power buff. Even on this team specifically, we're not going to hit his 100% buff, because we don't use 300 skill points in a turn, because, fun fact, Soe's skill does not count towards that. So if you're sitting at 260 points, which I think is what I was at on this nuke turn, when we get there, using Soe's 80-point skill does not contribute to that at 260. You have to have already used 300 points before using Soe's skill to activate the extra 50% buff from Soe, which is kind of unfortunate. So we're running Raphael, who's got a 55-point skill, Shuna's got a 55-point skill, Violet and Blanc are 80s, and that's great, but that doesn't quite equal 300 by itself, and all the other skills at that point are gonna be too expensive to where we either use that or we don't use Soe's buff. But Raphael will be able to help you activate the 100% pierce power from Protector Benimaru, therefore making Soe AoE everybody quite hard, even with half of his buff active. And also, because the ult resistance down is going to be on one character, it's going to make us hit extremely hard against whoever that one character might be. Now, his second skill is totally useless here. Like, we're not stunning, the skill is sealed, we're not stun striking here because we're not stunning to begin with. So that skill leaves a little bit to be desired for a lot of teams. He doesn't really bring any other generic viability. He doesn't orb change, he doesn't alt swap. This was before alt swapping was a thing. We didn't get alt swapping until the 1.5 anniversary, or the meta half prior to it with the light hero. She was the first character to do that. So the light 3.0 and Raphael's team and all the stacking teams before that, they ran without an alt swapper, which is terrible to think about now looking back on it. But we did make it work, and so Raphael doesn't need that kind of skill. Today's teams we do, though. And his skill is, I would say slightly underpowered, because guaranteed pierce by itself is not very strong. 50% ult down is very strong, but it's only on one character, and it's not an AoE skill, which nowadays you would kind of expect it to be. At least maybe on an 80-point skill. So how would I upgrade Raphael's kit to be in line with today's meta? AoE ult resistance down 50% for one, and then the pierce, like, that's not very big. So maybe I would bump it up to like 70% ult resistance down across the board and guaranteed pierce. I think that would be worthy of an 80-point skill, more so than what we're getting, because Warrior's Mind Violet is 55% ult down, but also 50% crit damage or 40% crit damage for physical, somewhere around there. That's pretty impactful. So if we were to make Raphael better, he would have to do something equivalent to that. But, we're 7 turns in, we've got the EX ult for Zoe, we have not yet even used Raphael in any way, shape, or form, which, again, does hurt his generic viability on a lot of teams. 55 points is a lot to ask for, so if you only have a burst team or something like that, he's not really going to fit that well. He's meant for a stacking team, whether it be green or blue, it doesn't really matter, because he's not biased any one way towards a certain color of orb. You can bring him on a stacking green or a stacking blue, and it's not really going to affect it, as long as you can pierce, and maybe if you want to stun. Since he's given away for free, that means that between this Raphael and the 100 Octagram emblems I've got for free a couple weeks ago, you could get Octagram Guy, and now you have 2 guaranteed stunning characters, which is great, especially for like this stage in particular. If you were to use an Overlord Rimuru team, you could stun Albus, so she doesn't seal your body and spirit skills, and you could stun Grucius, because he's the one that cleanses and everything like that, and he also buffs their attack. And so you could cheese this stage now with a free Raphael who's stunning, and that quote-unquote free guy that you were able to pick up with those emblems. So now we're ready to nuke. We've used everything. We only have right here, as you can see, 50% synergy power, because we did not have enough points before using Zoe's skill. And then when we nuke, I'll pause it so we can actually see it. We're going to do some attacks with Zoe, because it's fun. 80k right there. His 200% orb up to 491, sorry. And then his ult, we'll watch it. And you can see the huge drastic difference that 50% ult reduction does against a single target. So Whirling Shadow Slash, 4.4 against Albus, because that's who we put that debuff on, versus 2.9. So almost 1.5 million extra damage, almost, against Albus, because she had that 50% ult resistance down. That's pretty impactful right there. Why is it an extra 1.5? Well, because you take 2.9 and you cut it in half. It's 1.4 million? That's pretty much what we're gaining here. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong right there. So if you're only going against a single target, like, you can see the difference of power, right? So Raphael is still a solid support option to this day on teams that you can run that generally want Pierce and ult resistance down. You're not already getting it off of some other unit that fits on that team already. So that is the re-showcase for Light Raphael. Quite old at this point, but still fairly usable to this day. He does have a turn 3 protection trait. I don't think I went over that. Maybe I did at the beginning. That does give him extra viability as maybe a support slot if you have extra dupes for him. Like, maybe this free Raphael was not your first one. It's your second or your fourth copy. One of the two. Maybe got some extra viability there. But let me know what you guys think of Raphael. That's it for me. Take it easy, guys. And I'll see you all later.